You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show tonight. Oh, it's a conspiracy in the house tonight. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking to Jim Marrs about his new book, Population Control: How Corporate Owners Are Killing Us. That's a shocker. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with Richard Sauder about underground bases and tunnel. What's the government trying to hide from us? So like I said, it's a conspiracy night tonight. So I hope you all have a pen and paper so you can take notes, because I think it's going to be one of those kind of shows. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healing, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call. Just think you can spend one-on-one time with me, the doc. Anyway, also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Before I tell you about Jim, I just want to make one more quick announcement, and I want to do a shout out to Robert Arleo or Ariano. Robert Ariano, and I just want to thank you for your very generous donation to the show. We really appreciate it. It just helps keep things moving along here. So, Robert, thank you very much. Let me tell you a little bit about Jim Marrs and get him on the air. Jim Marrs is an award-winning journalist and author. After graduating from the University of North Texas with a degree in journalism, he worked for and owned several Texas newspapers before becoming an independent author. Marrs is the author of the New York Times bestsellers Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, the basis for the Oliver Stone film JFK, and Ruled by Secrecy. His in-depth overview of the UFO phenomena, Alien Agenda, is the best-selling nonfiction book on UFOs in the world. Interesting. Having been translated into several foreign languages, he is a frequent guest on several nationwide radio talk shows like this one and television programs. So please welcome the author of the new book, Population Control: How Corporate Owners Are Trying to Kill Us, the always fantastic Jim Marrs. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Well, I'm doing good, Dr. Rita. Thank you for asking.
Well, I always love having you on the show, and this new book is freaking amazing.
Well, I think it's really, really important. I mean, I've been dealing, as you well know, with a lot of conspiracies for a lot of years. And a lot of times I can understand where a lot of people say, well, that just gets into politics and that gets into philosophies. And, you know, everybody's got their own opinion. But I want to tell you something. After reading the material I've put together in Population Control, I think people are going to realize this is deadly serious, because there are people up there running the show who want you dead. They just as soon have you dead. And I noticed from the inflection of your introduction, you said corporate owners are killing us, kind of like, yeah, you know, what else is new? But I'll tell you what's new is that...
Well, I mean, you know that I work in the alternative health field. So
oh, absolutely.
I have to tell you. So a note that I wrote down, it's like... you know, what kind of things are corporations doing to kill us? And then my little comment after that was, yes, 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 and yes. So that part wasn't really a shocker to me.
No, of course not. Anybody who studies vaccines, the controversy, or fracking, or air pollution, or food, processed food, obesity, we all know this stuff. I think where I'm coming from a slightly different angle is that a lot of people chalk that up to just corporate greed, corporate ignorance, corporate indifference. You know, they don't care. They just want to keep the bottom line up there. And, you know, there is a certain argument to that. But if you really stop and think about it, I don't care. You'd have to be a pretty sorry human being to run a company and realize that you're doing things that are harming people and then continue to do it. But what I'm trying to tell people, and what I document in my book, Population Control, is how that all of these things are run by a handful of multinational corporations whose owners, and let me stress owners, because I'm not talking about corporate presidents or vice presidents or the vice president of PR or the vice president of research or the multitudinous workers within these corporations. All of these are probably good, fine, upstanding people, including some of the officers. Okay, the problem is they are just capable administrators. Okay, a lot of them have Harvard business degrees and they're sharp people, but their job is to keep the corporation running smoothly, keep the bottom line up, and just they're good administrators. I'm talking about the people who set the policies and who know better but are doing things to consciously trim the human population. And that's because they adhere to the eugenics argument that we need to make sure that we don't leave a ring around the gene pool. Okay? And they think...
Wait a minute. Eugenics? I mean, I'm sorry, but GMOs aren't eugenically oriented, and chemtrails and air pollution...
They do if they kill off people.
But it's not specific. It's not selective.
Well, I know. That's the whole idea. See, first off, let's go back and understand about eugenics. That's a movement started in the 1800s. And basically, it was people who said, well, we just got to cut down on the surplus population, and particularly people who aren't our ethnicity or don't have our skin color, or don't have our blue blood background. And by the 1930s, most of the states had sterilization laws. Okay, now what happened there, Dr. Louise, is that the Nazis in Germany got hold of this and they bought into it and carried it to its logical extreme. You know, we've got some people here, some Jews, some gypsies, some people that we think are just kind of rabble, and we need to get rid of them, so we'll just kill them. Okay, and that gave rise to the concentration camps and the Holocaust, and the world reacted, thank God, and said, hey, that's not right. And so the whole eugenics movement kind of fell into disfavor, but it didn't go away. The people who started it, the blue bloods, if you will, the Harrimans, the Rockefellers, who were all behind this, now they control these multinational corporations, and they're seeing to it that the human population gets trimmed at the weakest points, the very young, the very old. And I realize that one of the first arguments would be, but wait a minute, if they're trying to make money and have control through these big corporations, why would they want to kill off their consumers? Well, it's because in the eugenics philosophy, the basic problem in the world, and this has been articulated from everyone from Prince Philip to former U.S. ambassadors, and they say the underlying problem is overpopulation, and we just have to trim the population. So what they're doing is they are forwarding that agenda by trying to give us bad air and processed food, and I don't have to tell you about the rise of obesity in this country, and vaccines with thimerosal and GMOs and Roundup herbicide with glyphosate in it, all of this stuff, which is killing off the weakest segments of the population and then making the rest of us sick. So we have to go and get more and more medical treatment, buy more and more drugs. And so the irony of it all is they're not only getting rid of trimming the population, but they're profiting from it.
Scary. What a life we live. And I'll agree. I even think that the population is kind of out of control. I mean, from a supply point of view, I mean, we've fished the oceans, we've cut down all the trees. I mean, there are too many people for us to provide for. But I have to share something with you, Jim. So one of the things that I have been doing recently has been looking at maps that were drawn at the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. These are these aerial view maps. And so it's a map of like San Francisco or Chicago or New York. And there was like nobody there. A couple of houses, maybe a little downtown. That's it. And I'm going, oh my God, in 100 years, they have become these vast areas with all of these people. And where did all the people come from in 100 years? Just 100 years. It really is kind of flabbergasting.
Well, it kind of is, and I think the reason for that is as nutrition, food became more plentiful. There was a time in Europe where salt was highly prized. Okay, it was about like gold. Salt, today nobody thinks about salt because you go to the store, you can get all the salt you want. And even as late as World War II in England, if you had an orange or a banana or a pineapple, you were king. Okay, because nobody could get that. In fact, I recall reading about the Jack the Ripper murders. They enticed some of those victims into the carriage to become the victim of Jack the Ripper by enticing them with grapes, because only the richest people could afford grapes back in the late 1800s. And so we've had better food, we've had better services, we've gotten medicines and antibiotics, and that's why the population has grown. But let me tell you, I'm afraid you've fallen into the same trap that they've set for all of us with this whole idea of overpopulation. If you live in one of the big cities and you look around and you see the pollution and the noise and the crowding and the crime and the traffic jams, it's real easy to say, whoa, man, there's just too many people. Okay, but consider this. The average living space in Hong Kong today is 1,700 square feet. Now, of course, that's the average. There are some people who have whole condominiums that take up the whole top floor, and then there's others living in little hovels. But the average is 1,700 square feet. Now, as a young man, I lived in apartments, and 1,700 square feet, that's a pretty good size apartment. So based on 1,700 square feet, the entire 7.5 billion population of the earth could live comfortably enough just in the state of Texas. And if you want to spread out, you want to have almost an acre for every person, then they could all live on the continent of Australia. Okay, and it's true. You can check this out. So now what we really have is not so much an overpopulation problem as a population concentration problem. Because you're absolutely right. Back in the 1800s, everybody was kind of spread out on the farm, and then they all moved to the city. And the cities have just grown and grown into these megalopolises, And
is that a real word?
No, I don't think so. But you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
And so all of this has been done. There's been conscious volition behind all this. For example, back in the turn of the century in Los Angeles, they had the red car lines. These were electric streetcars that moved people all around. Okay, and everybody got around. It was cheap and it was non-polluting. It was really great. And what happened? Well, the automobile manufacturers and the gasoline companies bought up the red line and eventually shut it down, and then built all these freeways so everybody could drive their cars. And so that now you go out to Los Angeles and try to drive somewhere and you're in a traffic mess almost every hour of the day. In fact, I find it pretty funny, both in New York and in New York City and in Los Angeles, when I'm visiting those places and people get together for about the first 15 or 30 minutes of the conversation. It's all, did you take the 101? No, I came on this one. And, I found a way around this. And they're all talking about how they managed to try to negotiate all that traffic. Well, there's ways of doing things. China and Japan have these high-speed electric trains, these jet trains, and they've got 8 and 10 dozens of them. In the United States, here, this great modern country that's put men on the moon, we got one. We got one fast train from, I think it's Boston to Washington. It's just outrageous. We're just not doing things we could be doing. And when they say, yeah, but we're using up all the raw materials, well, in a way, yes. I think there's a real problem with logging, 200-year-old trees and whatever. And it's so unnecessary because it's been proven and shown that 1 acre of cannabis, hemp, can produce as much paper as 20 acres of full-grown trees. Okay, but no, we can't grow hemp because you also get marijuana from that, and that's illegal. And why is it illegal? Well, because back in the 30s, William Randolph Hearst had a wood pulping process that was environmentally disastrous and pretty costly, but the only thing that would compete with it was hemp. So he started through his newspaper chains of demonizing hemp, and because along with his relationship with the DuPonts, who had just come out with synthetic fibers, Dacron, nylon, and the only thing that compete economically with those was hemp. Okay, so they all jumped in too, and had one of their family members, a former prohibition agent named Harry Anslinger, go around and make up stories about how dangerous pot was, and he got Congress to pass laws against marijuana, and then he got the states to follow along by saying, look, the feds outlawed it, it's a dangerous drug, and we're still fighting that battle today. So my point being, there are alternatives. We all know that there's serious interest and serious work being done on free energy, but we still don't have it, okay, because these corporate leaders don't want it. It would upset their monopolies.
So did you hear in Oregon, they're looking at putting some kind of device in your car that measures how much you drive, because people that have electric cars aren't paying taxes like the people that run gas cars, and they feel like they're losing revenue. So instead of taxing gas, which I'm sure they would still do anyway, they're going to tax you based on what the little black box in your car says for your road tax or whatever.
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like that they've just about taxed cigarettes out of existence, and they probably can't tax anymore. So let's start taxing the air people breathe, since they're not breathing, it's not smoking and paying their cigarette taxes. It's just ridiculous. There's ways of doing things that we could be doing so much better. But then also consider this: we are living in a corporatocracy right now. Okay, and here's
what does that mean? What is that?
Well, here's what I mean. In Nazi Germany, when the Nazi Party took over the German government, they then moved to take over the corporations, and it was that blending of state and corporate power that is the very dictionary definition of fascism. Okay, now fascism came from Benito Mussolini, the World War II dictator of Italy, and his black-shirted fascistes that put him in power. They were the Italian equivalent of the Nazis, and from the fascisti came the term fascism. But it's interesting because Mussolini himself once said that fascism is really not the correct term. The more correct term is corporatism. Okay, so what happened was in fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, the state gained control over the corporations, and it was that blending of state and corporate power that is fascism. Now, here in modern America, the corporations have gained control over the state, but the end result's still the same: fascism. And this is why nothing gets done. This is why Congress is just deadlocked, because number one, they're all bought and paid for by the big money that only the big corporations have. So the state has gained control. I mean, the corporations have gained control over the state. And as such, though, they also now control the NSA, CIA, the FBI, the NRO, all these alphabet agencies that know anything and everything that's going on. So all the members of Congress are either bought and paid for or blackmailed, and they got total control. And that's why our Congress, our supposed elected representatives, don't seem able to do anything or agree on anything.
But I mean, that's the saddest part of the whole thing. We talk about different conspiracies, UFOs and, the FDA and big pharma and all of this stuff. And to me, the whole ordeal with our elected officials, I think, is the biggest scam of them all.
Absolutely. And when you get to like medicine, okay, supposedly we have these watchdog agencies like the Federal Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control. Okay, well, I'll typify this. During the Bush administrations, the head of the CDC was a Dr. Julie Geberding. Okay, and as soon as Bush left office, and she was always pushing for vaccines. You got to take your vaccines. The vaccines are good for you. Vaccines are harmless. And as soon as the Bushes were out of office, she resigned from as director of the CDC and went to work for Merck Pharmaceuticals as head of their vaccine division. Now, whether or not there was a genuine conflict of interest there, you got to admit it sure looks like it.
Hey, speaking of health, I'm going to throw this one out at you, okay? And I don't know how much you pay attention to the news. I mean, I don't, but this one caught my eye, and it seemed very appropriate to ask. What do you think of the mysterious deaths of the 5 alternative health practitioners that happened in the past, I'm going to say, month or so? It was like 3 were dead in 1 week, and then 2 more are dead now.
Well, and this all comes right at the time that California was passing that horrendous bill mandating that everybody's got to take vaccines and there's no exemptions. Okay. And of course, then you go back and you look at some 300 microbiologists that all died off, many of them under very unusual circumstances. The very people who, if there is a pandemic like they've tried to warn us about with swine flu and then Ebola, these are the very people who would be able to tell us whether it's real or not, and more importantly, could come up with an anecdote, And then you look and you realize that since last December, there's been about 50 or 60, or actually more, major CEOs and of major corporations that have resigned, taken early retirement, or they have. There was about 40 international financial people that kind of all died off, and it's I can't. There's always plausible deniability, Well, he was driving, he fell asleep and hit a car or hit a tree, and then you've got journalists and you've got people who like Jeff Rentz who get knocked off the road, and you got to wonder where coincidence leaves off and conspiracy begins.
Yeah, I don't know.
But again, we were talking about the Nazis and about fascism. This is Nazi methodology. The Nazis in Germany, if you were not going along with their program, or if you were in any position to give them some resistance, they just killed you. That's what it was all about. And unfortunately, I think we see that today. I mean, think Vince Foster, think Ron Brown, think the wife of Bill Casey, You got people who try to speak out, and then all of a sudden they just died under strange circumstances.
They had a little accident day.
Had a little accident, just terrible tragedy, and you never know. You never really know. I know for years there's always been this galloping cancer. There's people who seem to be raising a stir and causing some problem there, and actually maybe making some headway and trying to get things a little bit better. And all of a sudden they get cancer and die. And the conspiracy theorists were all going, I think they're taking them out. But then, of course, they said, oh, yeah, no, there's no way, because there's no way to induce cancer. Well, now we know there is. And they had it back in the early 60s. And so now you have to go back and look at all of these prominent people that died of cancer, and you have to wonder about them. But of course, the reality is that there is cancer. It is out there, and some people get it. Some people can resist it. Speaking of cancer, though, you realize that the huge increase in cancer incidences in recent years has been traced back to the Salk polio vaccine, which was rushed through federal certification because, and I remember this distinctly, my parents were scared to death of polio and told me, don't go swimming here and don't do that. And it was a real fear. So in order to try to placate the public, they rushed the vaccine, the polio vaccine, into production. And the way they produced it was through monkey glands. And what they didn't realize at the time was that along with the polio vaccine, they were shooting up people with this simian immunization virus 40, which begins to work on your immunization system over a period of years, over a long period of time, and finally breaks it down to the point to where you become susceptible to the invasion of cancer cells. And they realized this later on, and this has been well documented, but needless to say, it has not been widely reported or reported over and over and over like the media does when they have an agenda they want to press, because they don't want to demonize the vaccine industry. And I'll give you another one, Dr. Louise, is one of the topics that's hot today and that people quite rightly are so concerned about are these public shootings, and more importantly, these school shootings in their schools. People are upset about that, and rightly so. And the mass media, they jump all over it and curve it up and down. But all they seem to be able to talk about is guns, and the idea seems to be is that if we just all give up our guns, none of this would happen. Of course, never mind that the people committing these are idiots and criminals, and they steal guns, they make guns. You're not going to pass a law and keep it out of their hands. But the key thing is, and I think you're probably well aware of this, the common denominator in all these public shootings are the psychiatric drugs. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet the media will not talk about that. Why? Because if you watch broadcast television and they cut to a commercial, if they're not selling you a car and a truck, they're selling you a drug. And these pharmaceutical corporations are one of, if not the leading advertiser for these networks, and they're not about to bite the hand that feeds them. And yet, so all they can talk about is drugs, and yet I want to tell you...
and they're not even good ones.
No, they're not. And they're not...
I mean, fun ones, not good...
Oh, yeah. No, not pleasant drugs. These Ritalin, Adderall, and that Shamanic or whatever that the guy in Charleston was on. If you read the fine print, they tell you contraindications are that it promotes suicidal and homicidal tendencies. Holy cow. Mm-hmm. They say there's like 250,000 people in the United States on these SSRI drugs, and that they do promote homicidal, suicidal tendencies. And so, obviously not on everybody, but consider that even if 0.1% reacts violently to those drugs, that means there's 25,000 mass murderers running around, potential mass murderers. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty scary thought. But see, nobody even addresses the drugs. It's always
they don't want to. They don't want to. That's like a taboo subject. But exactly. I'm going to throw this one out at you. When they had, I guess it was, I don't know. I don't really watch the news. But when they had the one school shooting like a year or 2 years ago, and then there was the whole thing that there was some police simulation that was like 2 towns over the week before, and then poof, the shooting happened, and that happened in several situations. Are you tracking with me?
Yeah. Are you talking about Sandy Hook?
Yeah. Okay. But I have to tell you, I heard on the radio today or yesterday that they're doing some kind of interstate, simulation thing in, I'm guessing in Louisiana, West Louisiana, by Cato Lake and East Texas. And so this is for you and everybody listening. They're doing some kind of simulation. So if you hear some weird crap going on in East Texas or Louisiana, you heard it here first.
Well, it's not only Texas and Louisiana. It's Arizona, New Mexico, a little bit of Southern California, Utah. I think you're talking about Jade Helm 15, which just cranked off on the 15th.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to tell you right here in North Texas, in a little old, I live in a rural county, essentially, and night before last, I got a call from a person up in Decatur, Texas, that said that they heard flat car trains pulling in and unloading military equipment. I also heard from a friend of mine that who has a high school buddy that flies and takes photograph of oil field properties for Halliburton, and they were out in the Midland, Texas area, and they were flying over the Walmart there, which is one of the Walmarts that they've announced they're closing for plumbing problems. And he said there's the middle of the day and here's a Walmart and the parking lot was just empty, and they thought that was kind of strange. So they circled back around, and this time they saw a bunch of police cars around one end of this Walmart store. So they thought, hey, maybe something's going on there. So they circled around again. At this point, they saw the lawn and garden center on one of the fenced-in areas of the Walmart contained military equipment. Okay, and that was kind of strange enough. But then they said what happened was a military helicopter showed up and forced them to land. And a military officer came over and took their cameras and took all their film and took their computer chips and their flash drives and everything else. And when they go, how are we going to explain this to our boss? He said, just give him this card. Gave him some kind of business card. They went back, gave it to their boss. I said, and what did you finally hear out of that? And he said, nothing. So there's some real stuff going down right now, and most people are not even being aware of it.
Oh, I know, but it seems like, there was so much going on. Like there would be one of these exercises, and then within days or a week, there would be some kind of shooting. And
exactly.
I'm like, okay,
exactly.
So there's these exercises going on again. So I wonder if we're going to find another one of these mass shooting things happening.
It's entirely possible. I think obviously what they're doing is pre-positioning troops and equipment, for what they want to do. In fact, I've talked to some people who are active in the military, and they say this is an exercise to see the public reaction if they declare martial law. And they said,
great.
so they go through this exercise, see, and it's kind of a test. If everybody questions, if there's public resistance, then they can back off and say, well, it's just an exercise. We're just practicing, nothing there, folks. But if nobody resists and they position all their stuff and they move along, then if a false flag operation occurs or whatever, they're in a position to go ahead and just, implement martial law.
Well, where I live now, which is pretty podunk, they just got okay to get a grant to get riot control gear. And I'm like, okay, but who are you going to riot control against?
Exactly. Well, that's another thing, so they're practicing here in North Texas for this Jade Helm. I know they're practicing down around Fort Hood, and they say,
and they must be practicing again in West Louisiana.
And West Louisiana, and they say, well, we're practicing for more operations over in the Middle East like Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, wait a minute. I've seen pictures of Iraq and Afghanistan. They're deserts. They've got bald mountains and just big desert things. They don't have rolling wooded hills like we have in Louisiana or in North Texas or East Texas. Is just something flaky about the whole thing. Now, if you want something to really get your hair on standing on end, go and Google Jade Helm, JADEHELM 15, and look at their official logo, okay? At the top it says Jade Helm, and at the bottom it says Master the Human Domain. Oops, whoa, what's the human domain? Well, everything has to do with the human, and they want to master it. They want to control everything to do with the human domain. And then they have the crossed arrows, which traditionally are the symbol for air power, and they're superimposed over a sword, which is traditionally the symbol for ground power. But look right in the middle, and you'll see what first appears to be a little white blob, and it's like somebody spilled white out on there or something. But you look closer, it is a wooden shoe, a clog, if you will. And having written this book called The Rise of the Fourth Reich, which is how the Third Reich Nazis were brought over here and rolled into our military-industrial complex and have brought fascism to the United States, I was well aware of Hitler, the Third Reich, and that wooden shoe immediately prompted my connection to the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, where they would take people capable of working and they put them in striped pajamas and give them wooden shoes, wooden clogs to wear, because they're heavy and you can't run, you couldn't outrun them, and you can't sneak around anywhere because they can always hear you coming. And the other thing is that they would give them these wooden clogs, but no socks. And as a result, those wooden shoes would irritate their feet would get infected, and they'd die sooner. So my question is, why is this symbol evocative of a Nazi concentration camp doing on a military exercise being conducted in the United States in 2015?
Because they want to, hang on a second, I need to bring this up here. They want to master the human domain.
Of course. The master race.
That's scary. Okay, we need to move on because I could just spend the rest of the time talking about this. But you heard it here first, people. If weird stuff is going on, pretty soon.
Well, the thing I would say is, please, everybody listening to this, start educating yourself. Read my book, okay? I'm not asking for your belief, but just read it, read the information, then go check my sources, and then check it out for yourself. And then at that point, it won't be a question of whether you want to believe me or not. You'll know it for yourself. And then once you know it, start spreading the word, and so that the next time they try to pull a false flag attack and some kind of cover story and some type of new power grab, maybe we could just stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. You know, they've been trying to get us in a war.
But then
with
they'll
Iran.
just put it into martial law.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, we can just say, no, okay? Supposedly, our police forces are there to serve and protect. So if we can, supposedly, so, you know, and also the same with our military. I still know some young people that are in the military today, and they're serious about their oath of allegiance, not to the president, not to the Obama administration, not to the Pentagon, but to the Constitution of the United States. And if they get what they can finally deduce as an illegal order, they not only have the right, they have the duty and obligation to say, no, I'm not going to do that. So if they're told, okay, you know, march down those city streets, kick in doors, take people's weapons, they just say, no, we're not going to do that. They've been trying to get us in a war with Iran now for about 10 years, but they can't quite make it work because every time they're about to get everybody saying, yeah, okay, then enough people go, no, we're not going to do that. So it just hadn't happened. Same thing happened during the Reagan years when they tried to get us into a war in Central America, down in Nicaragua. But enough people said, no, we're not going to do that. And so it never happened. Yeah, what it turned into was the Iran-Contra scandal.
Well, they had to cover up all those guns.
Sure.
But let's get back to population control. Oops. Except don't hit the microphone. Okay, population control. If they want to reduce the surplus population, why not just introduce some kind of bacteria disease? You know, there's all that talk that HIV, that was one of the goals of it, was to reduce population.
Well, it has.
It has. Why not bring something like that in for real to just cut it off?
Well, they've kind of tried that. If you remember the bird flu and the swine flu and the Ebola, and you know, but they're playing with fire there, because if they mount a true pandemic and it gets out of hand, then you know that could be just disastrous. So they're playing around just enough with these things to where people get scared, they run down, they get vaccinated, and they pick up more bad stuff in their system, and they get more and more sick, and yet not quite to the point of where it is a massive pandemic. And again, it's back to the point to where they sicken the general population through these adjutants and additives that they put in these vaccines. But they don't just outright kill people, because there'd be a big public outcry about that. And again, we're back to the dead microbiologists. So I think they are working on that, but they've got to be very careful, because it's kind of like starting these wars. They start wars and end wars, and there's always some new war going on. If they can't make it work in the Middle East, then they'll go to the Ukraine. And that's another thing, by the way, that I mentioned in my book, Population Control. I talk about the God Syndicate, GOD, guns, oil, drugs, the three largest money-making commodities in the world, and they're all controlled by these same globalists, these same multinational corporations. So when you get to guns, I think it very ironic that, according to congressional reports, up till the present time, 78% of the arms sold around the world to people, groups, terrorist groups, everybody else, comes from the United States. We are the arms merchant of the world, as compared to Russia, which sells 5% of the arms, and China, which sells 3% of the arms. So Russia and China combined only account for 8% of the arms being dealt with all around the world, while the good old US of A is providing 78% of them. Now, the irony of it is while we're arming everybody and their uncle all around the world, over here, as you well know, they've been trying to take the guns away from everybody, all the citizens, all the honest people. And of course, as they say, and it's trite, but it's true, you outlaw guns, only the outlaws are going to have guns.
Well, that's true. And, I was just thinking, well, then I should get like an oil change with, a few $1 billion in guns that I buy, or maybe like when I fill up my tank, I should get another round of bullets for my gun. I mean, if they're all connected that way. There's a lot of people that believe that one of the things that is happening is, two things really. It's a two-part thing. They're getting the guns away from people so that in the United States they can't defend themselves. Right. And then two, it's like, turning your gold for jewel or for cash, get rid of that old junk. And so then there's a whole financial collapse, and people have nothing, because they gave their gold away, for the few $100 that they're going to get for it.
Well, look what's happening in Greece, and just understand that the way things are going, it looks like we're going to be facing a similar situation here. You got people who had their life savings in those banks in Greece, and then they just say, "Oh, sorry, not there anymore."
Is that really what happened? I've been kind of following it, sort of, not really. A little bit. Yeah. Okay, I have people that keep me informed, sort of what's going on. But the I know that they were only allowed to take out like $137 a week, right, or something like that.
So wait a minute. You go put $1,000 in your bank account, and then you decide you want to get it back, and they say, no, you can only draw out $150 a week or something. Yeah, that's the way it's happened. And it's even happened here in the United States. I remember a few years ago, there was a bank in the Northwest that had some trouble, and they just kind of shut it down for a few days. And of course, all the people had their money in that bank rushed down and said, I want my money. And they said, well, you're just going to have to wait. And they dribbled out, and here's $50 there, and you come back and get it. That's not what the idea of the bank is supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to go in the bank and give them your money and then go get your money whenever you want it. But what this shows us is the flimsy house of cards that is our financial system. And it's not going to take a whole lot to bring it down. We saw a little glitch here the other day when the stock market shut down, supposedly because of a computer glitch, although there's rumors that it was a cyber attack by, who knows, China, Russia, the New World Order people, who knows. But it does show that these things can and do happen, and that I think people need to be more prudent about what they do with their money.
And so what would you suggest? There were so many people that were into that Bitcoin thing. Oh, get Bitcoin. But Actually, I think you were one of the Bitcoin people too, weren't you? At one point in time,
No,
that wasn't you. Okay.
No, I've kept up with the Bitcoin thing, and I still think it's a good idea. But I don't think there's any question that some con men got involved in it too, and there were some people that kind of lost out in the early stages of that. But I think they're getting it together now, and I think that PayPal, for example, computer money and stuff. I think there needs to be some diversity of how we do this. Now, how you handle all that is going to be up to the individual and what you think, what you believe, and how you want to handle it. But I would say, I think if you look at the rich people, what they're doing is they're buying tangible assets. Okay, they're putting their money in land, gold, silver, even guns. Okay, there's never been a quality firearm produced in the world that's done anything but appreciate in value over time. So I'm not advocating everybody go buy a gun, but I'm just saying at least you know if the money's no good, your gun still works. Same thing with any other tangible asset. And as a matter of fact, in my book, Population Control, I point out that T. Boone Pickens, the great corporate raider from West Texas, has been buying up land all up and down the Olagala Aquifer up through the middle part of the United States, which provides most of the water for the breadbasket of the country in Kansas and Oklahoma and through there. And then
So they can hold that hostage?
Yeah. So because everybody's going to have some water, all right. Warren Buffett is heavily invested in water technology. In fact, you may recall that a few years ago it was announced that the Bush family had purchased 300,000 acres almost in Paraguay. Okay, and knowing the pro-Nazi background of Prescott Bush, I kind of joked and said, well, I guess they're going to start a housing development down there and call it Borman Acres. But now I find out, and it's in my new book, that this land they bought in Paraguay just happens to sit over the Guarani Aquifer. And one of the largest bodies of water in the world. So they're all getting control. In fact, you talk about central control over water. Perrier, Coca-Cola, Nestle, these three corporations almost have a chokehold on the water supply of the Western world, which is pretty scary if you think about it, because, you and I, we could go a few days, we could go hungry for a few days and still operate. But if we don't have any water, we're in deep trouble.
And what's interesting is, and I'm going to say almost 10 years ago, because I think we talked about it on this show in my first year, I had Daniel Brinkley on the show. You know who Daniel is?
Oh, yeah. Daniel and I are good friends.
Okay. And he was talking about the water back then. He goes, it's not an issue now, but given enough time, it is going to become the issue.
That's right. In fact, the head of Dow Chemical has gone on the record saying that water is the oil of the 21st century.
I believe it.
And as they bought up and got a monopoly over the oil, they're trying desperately now to get a monopoly over the water. And in fact, in many states, California, Washington State, they are now making it illegal to catch rainwater or to keep a rain barrel. Or to have a catch pond in your backyard. And there are people who've been fined and who are being threatened.
Thrown in jail.
Yeah, for having water. Now,
for collecting things that fall on their property. Now, if garbage falls on your property, it's your problem.
That's right. You got to pick it up. In fact, if you don't pick it up, they'll come and find you.
That's right. But, if it's the rainwater, well, that's not yours. It's like, that's God's.
And then the misuse we have of water is really, really incredible. This severe drought in California, and I've been out there several times now, and they really do have a problem. But what kills me is that one time out there meeting with some people and talking about the water problem they had, and I was in Palm Springs, and they took me to the Palm Springs Golf Club, okay? And it's a beautiful place, okay, with big wide greens and fairways, and it had the sprinklers going. They're spraying water all over the place. And I checked and found out that in Palm Springs, California alone, there's 125 golf courses. Now that's in the desert. So they put 125 golf courses in a desert and then try to water them all so they're all green and then wonder why they have no water. What? I don't, hello.
Okay, we have like 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure I ask you this question. Do you think that the goal, because I'm assuming it's not really the corporations, but something behind the corporations that we don't need to necessarily go into, that's pushing this agenda forward. But do you think the goal is to reduce the number of people to the number that is actually found on the Georgia Guidestone, or do you think there's a tie between the two?
Absolutely. The Georgia Guidestones is this granite monument there in Georgia. And it's kind of mysterious because it was commissioned by a guy who called himself Mr. Christian, but that's not his real name. In fact, they don't really know who was behind it. And there's been a lot of controversy about it, but it seems fairly clear that this was etched in stone, so to speak, and with several different languages, both ancient and new. And basically, the heading of it was, here's how we can have a more rational world. And I think it pretty well articulates the thinking of these globalists who would like to see their version of a better world. And the very first admonition is, it says, maintain humanity at a level of 500 million, okay, for perpetual balance with nature. Well, that sounds really good, until you stop and think, wait a minute, the current population of the world is 7.5 billion. Okay, now if we hold it to 500 million, what happens to the other 7 billion of us? And more importantly, who's going to decide what happens to the other 7 billion of us? And that brings us right back to population control, how corporate owners are killing us. Again, it's not the administrators and the officers of these corporations. It's the moneyed and royalty that's behind them who feel like there's just too many damn people and we need to get rid of them. And if we can do it in a way that we prosper and profit, so much the better. So, of course, like I said, the Nazis tried just out and out killing people. And
at least they were straightforward about it.
They were straightforward about it.
I mean, this is bull.
Well, that's what they learned, though. They learned that, after Nuremberg, we put those guys on trial and we hung a few Nazi leaders, and others committed suicide, were run off, and the ones we didn't bring over here and put in positions of power in the United States. And so they learned that lesson, and they can't be too obvious about it. So now they're using their power through these multinational corporations and very centralized corporate control to push policies that are detrimental to the population and yet fill their pocketbooks. As more and more people get ill, they demand more and more health care, more and more drugs, and so they're actually profiting from it.
But aren't they also killing themselves?
No, because they don't live the same way we do, okay? Here's a great story. There was a guy who was the head chef at the White House under both the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, and he talked about how Hillary Clinton sternly instructed him to buy only locally grown produce and organic stuff, okay? In fact, even had a garden on the White House roof where they got their own clean organic vegetables and stuff. And what's wild is that a few months ago when he came out and made these statements and pointed out that Hillary Clinton was adamant about eating nothing but pure and organic food stuff, and then it was pointed out that Hillary Clinton, who of course is trying to run for president, is fully supported by Monsanto. In fact, a guy named Jerry Crawford, who is head of her super PAC pushing for her presidency, is a former lobbyist for Monsanto, and she's come out in full favor of GMO and of the herbicide Roundup and unlike that. And so, but she doesn't do it herself. So it's that kind of hypocrisy. I was also heard a story about one of the Rothschilds who came over and was visiting in Texas, looking over some potential property, and he brought over a whole plane load of food and water and his own stuff. In other words, he wasn't going to drink anything over here or drink any of our water. So this is the hypocrisy that's going on, and this is how they take care of themselves while pushing off all of these hazardous food and drink on us.
But you can't do anything about the air. I mean, I guess you could like carry around your own bottled water everywhere, but that would kind of get old. But then again, you know, you go to Mexico and you drink a lot of beer.
That's right. That's right. You go to Europe and you drink a lot of beer and a lot of wine because they don't trust the water.
Oh, they don't trust their water there either?
No, the water thing is pretty incredible. When I started working when I was about 13 years old, I worked in a grocery store, okay? And I know back at that time, if you'd come in and asked me, where do I find the water, I would have pointed you to the garden hose. I said, it comes out of the hose or the faucet over there, you know? And then just over my lifetime, all of a sudden, there was a few little corner of a shelf that would have some bottled water. And now you go in the supermarkets and it's not a little portion of a shelf, it's an entire aisle of bottled water, you know, and everyone's just drinking bottled water because there's just too much problem with the public water. And one of the big problems, of course, is sodium fluoride. Sodium fluoride back in the 20s was sold as a rat poison, all right, in big cans with powder, and said don't breathe any of it. You know, it's toxic. And then again, we're back to the Nazis. They found out that just a little bit of sodium fluoride in the water supply kept these inmates in their concentration camps kind of dulled down and pacified and non-resistant. Okay, so they put sodium fluoride in the water of the concentration camps. Well, we found out about that, and then these corporate leaders decided that, well, since they could kind of show that in certain kids between the age of 6 and 12, if they got just a little bit of sodium fluoride on their toothpaste or in their water, that it might stop some of the cavities, and they convinced the ADA that this was a good thing. And all of a sudden now 70% of the water supplies in the United States have sodium fluoride in it, including Dallas. Okay. In fact, they just had a big controversy over that the first of this year. And for the first time, the Dallas City Council actually didn't stop laughing long enough to actually consider that. But, you know, the experts came to them and they again went back to fluoridating the water. Totally.
But I mean, that's only like one little thing. You know, there have been comments about, you know, people take their drugs. They take their Prozac or Ritalin or whatever, and then they pee, you know, and those discharge go into the water, and they might clean the water and get rid of a bunch of stuff, but they aren't testing for drug levels in the water. They aren't testing for, you know, are you, in your drinking the water, consuming some trace amount of the drugs that somebody else peed out?
Well, of course you are, and that's true. Sodium fluoride is not the only problem with water. Chlorine is another problem.
Oh,
chlorine is not good for you, okay? And like you said, plus you get medical residue, you get all of this stuff. Again, it's not like we don't have the technology to do something about that. It's simply the fact that we don't have the collective will, and that's because we have a dumbed-down population. People don't read anymore. I was flabbergasted. My wife taught high school for 40 years and retired, and a couple of years ago she called up her old high school out here in the country and offered to help with the senior art exhibit, which they always put in the school library. And the teacher, our teacher up there, said, well, we're not going to have a senior art exhibit this year. And she said, why not? And they said, well, they took all the books out of the library and they've turned it into an internet cafe. And so there's no place for an art exhibit. Oh, a high school library with no books? Are we
just no high school library? That's scary.
Are we insane or what? You know, and then we wonder why. Then we wonder why our kids do all these weird things and don't seem to know anything.
Anyway, Jim, I'm looking at the clock. We need to wrap. If somebody wants your book,
They can go to my website, jimmars.com. That's JIMMARRS.com. Or they can go to Amazon, or they can go to any bookstore.
And
it's published by HarperCollins.
If they go to your website, do you sign the books, or can they get a signed book?
I'm not really set up to do that, but there's ways of doing that. I'm making some public talks. I'll be in Austin at Brave New Books on July the 25th, and I'm about to try to get something set up over in the Dallas area. So just
if they go to your website and just kind of keep your eye on what's going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I try to post stories that they're not going to find in the conventional media.
Okay. Well, the music's going to come up, so we need to wrap. Jim, always a pleasure having you on.
Well, we're talking about pleasurable things, but I think you'll agree with me that these are topics that people need to be at least aware of and start looking at, if for no other reason than self-protection. If you want to try to maintain the life and fitness of your family and your loved ones, you better start paying attention to what these corporate owners are doing to you.
All right, Jim, got to go. You have a great night. Thank you. That's Jim Morris. His book is Population Control, How Corporate Owners...
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Who were the gods of antiquity? They've been described as the forces of nature, levels of consciousness, and aspects of our psyche. Stories that depict their incredible weapons, their flying machines, and their amazing adventures are characterized as being the product of our ancestors' fanciful imaginations. But what if the tales of the gods are true? Did the writers, chroniclers, and scribes of our distant past actually document a realistic view of our origin? My latest book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, looks at our most ancient legends. Learn of the torrid romances, elaborate plots, violent scandals, and conspiracies that played out in antiquity. Find out the role the gods played in the life and culture we have today. If you want to find out the truth of who we are and where we come from, order your copy of Man-Made today. For more information, go to www.manmadethechronicles.com. That's www.manmadethechronicles.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationships, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Go deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Yet another exciting episode we're going to have. We're going to be speaking with Richard Sauder about his book, Underground Bases and Tunnels. What is the government trying to hide? Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. So let me tell you a little bit about Richard, and let's get him on the air. Richard Sauder is a native Virginian with an abiding interest in Fortean unusual information and anomalous paradigm-busting data of all varieties. Beginning in early childhood, he had experienced first-hand contact with a variety of paranormal phenomena that had left him a bit puzzled and thoroughly persuaded that there was much more to the earth and the human perception and consciousness than mainstream American culture believes. Some of Richard's favorite research and reading interests are underground and underwater bases and tunnels, electronic mind control, freedom technology, UFOs, human prehistory, and remote antiquity. See, he's a great fit for this show. International politics and Kundalini energy, as well as alternative thought patterns. And his webpage, and correct me if I'm wrong with this one, Richard, is eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com?
That's correct.
That's correct. So please welcome Richard Sauder. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm glad I was 2.5 years ago. I was nearly killed by a shaman in Ecuador, with whom I lived, by the way. And in my last days with him, he almost killed me. I did survive and was hospitalized a little over 4 months and was discharged from the hospital. I'm still recuperating 2.5 years later. Initially, I could not stand up. I couldn't take one step. I was very extremely badly treated. If I had been treated just a little bit more harshly, I would have died. I wouldn't be here. So it was a serious attempt against my life, and for whatever reason, I did survive, and we're talking to each other.
Well, I'm glad that you are doing better. I didn't know that about your history. So, wow. That's all I can say is, wow.
It's one of those things that sometimes happens, and it happened to me. You know, we live on a planet that's infested by a plague of violence. And there is just an epidemic of violent assault and murder all across this planet, from north to south, east to west. My case is not unique at all. In fact, it happens all the time to all kinds of people, women, men, young people, old people. We as a human species, we have a severe spiritual problem, and it is that we kill each other in large numbers and or try to hurt each other viciously. And I don't know exactly why it is this way. I do know that it is. I am one of the victims of this epidemic. I am far from the only one. The victims are legion. There are millions and millions who are being assaulted and killed all the time. I'm sure right now somewhere, perhaps in Ecuador or the United States, there are people being viciously assaulted right now as we're speaking. It's sad, but it's the truth of our species. What is wrong with us, Rita?
But it seems like it's getting worse. You know, you see videos, people post on YouTube of, cops going ballistic on people. Actually, just before the show aired, I watched this video of these girls. I mean, they were kids, whatever. But egging on this 8-year-old to beat up this 5-year-old, and then, tell her, get her in the face. Now, that's already bad enough. To me, that's already bad enough. But the fact that they, 1, videotaped it, and then 2, put it on YouTube. It's like, really?
I hardly know what to say anymore, Rita. What happened to me was vicious. And all of these attacks are vicious. Sometimes they're for money. There are hit men, and yes, there are also hit women who do it for pay. These people exist. They're out there. They work for criminal organizations. They work for government agencies, for military agencies, and corporate organizations also employ hit men and hit women. It's enough to make you weep. In my case, I did cry one day towards the end of my lengthy hospital stay. I burst into tears one day for a few seconds while one of my doctors was visiting, and his reaction was, hey, cut that out. Enough of that. And I stopped in 5 seconds because he was right. What was weeping going to accomplish? Nothing. It would not objectively change my situation in one small particular. So I didn't indulge that self-pity any further than that. But it's enough to make you weep when you look out over the world, and to a certain extent, maybe to a great extent, this tremendous plague of violence can be attributed to evil. It's wicked, but where does it come from? And why do human beings fall prey to it and indulge themselves in the evil of attacking other people? And most of the time, the attacks are unprovoked and unjustified. Most, I won't say always, but when you go after people and brutalize them and kill them or almost kill them when they haven't mistreated you, then you have to ask, where does that come from? And it's not unusual on this planet. It's quite common. I mean, look at the military policy of the United States, and we'll be talking later about that with respect to the underground bases, or at least a good number of them, and look at the policies of these criminal cartels and neighborhood gangs and violent cliques in high school. There's a lot of violence in high schools in the United States, for example, where kids beat each other up, or even sometimes go after each other. Gangs will go after each other right in school with weapons, with knives and brass knuckles. Teenage boys, but not only teenage boys. The girl is very much a part of American culture and has been for years. And the cry goes up, girl fight, and everyone crowds around and two or more girls go at it viciously. It's not just a guy thing.
Oh, I know. And it's not a new thing, although it does seem
it's been there
like
for years.
It's
been there for years.
Well, I mean,
in my high school,
but it's not even a recent thing. I mean, it goes back to, indigenous cultures going after each other for, whatever, and these blood feuds and.
Well, Ecuador, for example, getting around to what happened to me, I don't know the motivation behind the attack against me on the part of the shaman, but still to this day there is a black market traffic in human heads in the Amazonian region. It's not talked about openly. The government doesn't mention it, but it happens, and the word for it is tsansa, the taking of human heads. In past centuries, it was done by warriors. They would chop off the head of an enemy in battle and take it back and preserve it and hang it from the rafters of their hut. The feeling being that you've got his head, so you've got personal power, and now you have his personal power, and he doesn't, because you killed him, you chopped off his head, and you have his head, and therefore can capture his personal power and use it for your own. That was what was behind that. But nowadays, there's international traffic, evidently, in heads, and actually a lot of human body parts, but including the heads. And so it still does go on, perhaps for different reasons in some respects than it did in the past, but it still happens. And it's another aspect of this violence. You could say, well, it's, India and Amazon chopping heads off. Well, tell me, isn't ISIS doing that in the Middle East? Doesn't the Saudi Arabian government chop people's heads off every Friday after Friday prayers and its official executions? They drag the selected designated victims out into the public square. A guy comes with a big sharp sword, a scimitar, and wacko, just chop head off. So why are we doing these things, Rita?
I don't have an answer for you.
Well, I
don't have an answer for you. So I don't know. Let's move on to underground bases, because this is just kind of
that's another question. Well, that's another question for which I don't really have an answer. I can give you some reasons that I found in the literature while I was doing my research, but as to the most secret.
Let me ask you this question first. So, what even got you started researching?
Oh, really? That's a short question, but it has a long answer. I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version of the long answer. People always start with what they think is the easiest question. In reality, the answer is long. In essence, my interest was piqued, and I decided to look into it. I wrote a short article for. My interest was piqued by rumors I heard when I moved out to Southwest United States in the late 1980s of secret underground bases and tunnels in the southwestern region of North America. So I didn't know what to think about that. I thought, well, either they are there or they are not. And I didn't really have any solid information about it. So when I had a little break in my schedule, I did some archival research. I went right to federal documents and so forth, and I quickly found that there were some underground bases large ones, publicly known, deep and technologically sophisticated. One of them, I just mentioned three briefly. One of them is Site R on the border between, it's an alternate underground Pentagon command center. It's in a small mountain in the Appalachian region, right on the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania. That's Site R, sometimes called Raven Rock. Then I have visited that place, but I've not been underground. You don't get to go in unless you have the proper security pass, which I don't. So I was not invited in. But you can look at part of it, at least through the fence. And you would have Mount Weather in the Appalachian Mountains in Northern Virginia, about an hour's drive from Washington, D.C. This is also another very large underground, technologically sophisticated U.S. government command, control, and communication facility run by FEMA. Site R is run by the Pentagon. And you have, of course, the ever-popular Cheyenne Mountain facility in Colorado, which is run by NORAD, the Joint Military Command of Canada and the United States for defense of the North American airspace. That base, or parts of it, have been featured in many movies and television shows over the years. And there are others. Those are just three that are pretty well known in popular culture. Now, I wrote all that up in a short little article that got published in UFO magazine out of Los Angeles. It was printed in early November of 1992. And at that time, I thought I had exhausted the topic. Over the holidays, just several weeks later, between Christmas and New Year's of 1992, I was awakened out of a deep sleep in the middle of the night in the wee hours of the morning by a very calm, matter-of-fact voice that spoke to me quite clearly in my right ear, in the inner ear. It was the voice of a male, adult, Caucasian speaking a normally accented, educated, late 20th century North American English. And what he said to me was, he started out by saying, the underground bases are real. Now, I was not asleep. I had been awakened from a deep sleep very suddenly and wondering why. Because I was all of a sudden very awake and extremely relaxed physically, which is an unusual state of mind and being. Nothing was wrong in my little apartment, so I was wondering why I had awakened when I heard the voice speaking to me. I immediately knew it wasn't the voice of an angel or a demon or extraterrestrial or God or Jesus, or that I'd lost my mind. I was quite clear that I was very lucid mentally. So he said, the underground bases are real. I understood immediately what he was talking about, and understood immediately I was hearing the voice of a real flesh and blood man. I subsequently found out how the transmission was made. It was using a technology that is well described in the United States patent literature of the 20th century. It uses modulated pulsed microwaves to transmit intelligible sound to the auditory cortex of the brain. And that comports completely with what I experienced. Now, he went on to say that there were these underground bases, that they were clandestine, that they were big and deep and technologically complex and sophisticated, that there were big programs and projects being carried out, and there were a lot of people involved. And as he spoke, I just got the impression of bureaucracy and technology and money and power and personnel and this deep, huge secrecy down there. And I thought, holy moly. As he was speaking, I was thinking, if what he's telling me is true, there's got to be a paper trail because this is so extensive. It can't be completely hidden. And in fact, that's the case. The next morning, I remembered what I'd been told during the night, and I started the literature search within a week, just sifting through technical documentation, industry journals and publications, military documents. I went all the way back to the World War II period and came forward through a period of several decades, and I found out, for half a century or more, a variety of agencies in the American government, military and non-military, but not only government and military agencies, have been very active underground and even have extended their activities undersea. And quite a bit of it has been open, but I did find indications that quite a bit of it is secret, compartmentalized, classified, and is not public. So you have the two. And I found a paper trail for all of that, for tunneling, for the technology, construction of the facilities, the agencies and companies involved. It's extensive. It couldn't all be hidden. It hasn't all been hidden. And that's how I got 3 little, pretty popular selling little paperback books out of it. The most recent one is in 2010, entitled Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond the X-Files. I no longer have any doubt whatsoever, and neither should any of my readers, that there are secret underground bases. We just don't know how many of them there are and where they are, but they do exist. And let me tell you, what I was told early on in my research is that to go down 1 mile, to build an advanced base underground 1 mile at a depth of 1 mile, it's so the art that it's comparative child's play for the modern civil engineering companies, that they routinely are capable of building at great depth 1 mile down. So if it's comparative child's play, and that's a direct quote from one of the major experts in the 20th century on underground base destruction, then if even in the late 20th century, 1 mile is comparative child's play, well, you can imagine what's really going on.
Well, I find that hard to believe. I mean, I think of what the distance of a mile is.
No, don't find it hard to believe. Read my books and educate yourself.
But
what you need to do, and everyone else needs to do, is to understand that you're living in a dream world, a fantasy, an illusion that's been carefully crafted to maintain you in a state of very carefully constructed ignorance. Those are the bars of your cage. Your self-imposed, what would you call them? Boundaries or restrictions based on what you think you know, which in reality you do not know.
I'll agree. Okay, so you're talking about these bases that could go down as far as a mile. Well, I mean, can they go further than a mile?
That's what I'm telling you. Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I'm telling you. You need to free your mind and realize the reality that you're dealing with, which is far beyond what you have been led to believe, far beyond.
Well, anyway, I mean, I'm doing a show here, Richard. Come on, I have to ask questions.
I understand that. The issue is, let me tell you that when I began my research, I was pretty well in that position myself. I had no clue. I went to a talk. I described this briefly, I believe, in my 3rd book. I went to a talk by a man on a topic that had nothing to do with secret underground bases. However, during the course of his talk, it was a public talk, during the course of his talk, he mentioned something that made me think, this guy knows something about underground bases. So after the talk, I went up to him and asked for his card, and he gave it to me. Then I asked him if I could make an appointment to see him, and he said, just give my secretary a call, and I'm sure you can come by the office for a few minutes. So I did. I sat in his office and I asked him my question about a where in New Mexico, where I thought there was an underground base based on my research. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, that's correct. There is an underground facility there. And I said, okay, well, how deep is it? And he said, 1 mile. And I thought he was pulling my leg. I said, 1 mile? It's 1 mile underground. I said, yes, sir, that's what I just told you. There's a facility there, and it's 1 mile underground. And I was flabbergasted. I hardly knew what next to ask, because it so violated the bounds of everything that I thought I knew about the world. And I now realize, based on subsequent conversations I've had, that yes, you can go down 1 mile and 2 miles. Listen, even back in the 60s, and I think even in the 50s, the underground mining industry was capable of dropping boreholes and shafts straight down 2 miles. And then from the bottom of those shafts, they would lower men and equipment down in those shafts and then tunnel out from the base of the shaft. So even more than half a century ago, the mining industry for the very deepest shafts could go down 9,000, 10,000 feet. You're talking miles straight down. And then work at that depth and tunnel out from there. In South Africa, even in the gold mining industry, some of the deeper mines go down 3 miles, and men work down in there. It's very hot, and it's not comfortable. It's dangerous. But what I'm telling you is, even gold miners, routinely, there's nothing classified about it, go down in tremendously deep mines and work. I mean, they carry out a work shift down there. So just digging down underground 1 mile or 2 or 3, the mining industry has been doing that for many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, my background, just to kind of give you a little about me, I mean, and I hate to kind of put myself in this box, but I mean, I would consider myself an ancient aliens enthusiast. I mean, I do believe that we were visited, or there was definitely levels of high technology that existed in our ancient past. And based on the mythological record, that there was stuff underground, because there's just too many stories. There's too many stories of people walking 10 leagues into a cave underground to discovering some realm, so go ahead.
That's correct, Rita. Their research, Michael Cremo would be a good example. Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, who wrote a book that's now classic, entitled Archaeology, have demonstrated, to my satisfaction and many thousands of other people's satisfaction, that indeed there have been previous cycles of civilization on the Earth. They went back and combed through the historical, archaeological, and anthropological literature going back a couple hundred years. They went through all of the journals, all of the publications, all of the conference proceedings, just read voraciously through thousands and thousands of pages of academic material, and pulled out all the anomalous data that pointed to a vast antiquity for the human species on this planet, and also for a vast previous cycle of history. In other words, there's a lot of evidence of archaeological artifacts, some of them pretty sophisticated, that date back when the geological strata in which these things are found are date back millions of years, in some cases many millions of years, which directly contradicts the prevailing historical, anthropological, and archaeological paradigm. It severely contradicts it. But their evidence, they just amassed hundreds of pages of this evidence, something like 900 pages.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yes, it turns mainstream archaeology, history, and anthropology on their heads. And they've been attacked for that, but their defense has been, well, you may attack us, But here's the day which your own scientists and your own experts have produced in your own disciplines. And the fact of the matter is that there is a great deal of evidence for previous human civilizations on this planet, including very advanced. And there are, well, to cite in Cappadocia, Turkey, is one good example. It's an excellent example of huge underground cities, and there are, I think, 20 or more of these in the Cappadocia region of Turkey that have been hewn out of the underground. I know a Turkish woman who's visited one of them that goes down more than 900 feet straight down underground and has more than 20 levels and could have accommodated, they believe, at least 20,000 people or so, along with some livestock. And the question is, who built those cities? Who excavated them? When and how and why? The answers are not really known to that, and that's just one example. Then there are other megalithic constructions all over the world, which mainstream archaeology cannot explain, so mostly does not deal with. And you're right, there are also many stories of tunnels, and including here in Ecuador and Peru, in the Andean region of South America. And the issue then becomes, why are we being lied to? We've been lied to for thousands of years. The lies continued to the present day. And with this current cycle of, if you want to call it civilization, there is yet more underground excavation and undersea. And my research strongly points to a great deal of it. I have uncovered only a little bit of it because quite a lot of it is covert, clandestine, top secret, classified. It's surprising that as many people have talked to me as have, and that I've been able to discover as much documentation as I have. To me, that simply directly speaks to the vast scope of what's going on. I believe that as much as we know, far, far more remains unknown, with a heavy emphasis on the far more part. Now, we're coming around to the reason for this. What is the motivation for it? Well, in some cases, it's to take weapon systems underground, like nuclear weapons, for example. I uncovered a lot of documentation for plans the Pentagon had to create long, hundreds of miles long tunnel systems in the western United States in which to put nuclear missiles deep underground, so that when there was a shooting nuclear war, no one could be sure exactly where the missiles were. And then at some point, even 6 months later, the crews underground could burrow out from underground with tunnel boring machines and fire off their nuclear missiles. I suspect some of that was done, maybe a great deal of that. The Chinese have done that. We know that publicly from the public record. The Chinese have something like 3,000 miles of underground tunnels for their nuclear missiles, for some of them. And so it's like a shell game. In the event of a nuclear war, you don't know exactly where all the tunnels are and where all the nuclear missiles are. So anyone who attacks China in a nuclear war would have to presume that at some future date, a day later, a month later, 8 months later, the Chinese would bring out some more nuclear missiles and fire them off. And this is part of the reality of what we're dealing with underground. There are also military underground command, control, and communication facilities, and I named two of them. There are two large, publicly known military underground bases in the continental United States, one in the east, one in the Rocky Mountain West. There are certainly others that are secret. I just don't know of them, and no one does who's not in those compartmentalized projects.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so they're building these bases. Now, I can understand for something like NORAD or for storing nuclear missiles where you would want to have it be clandestine. You know, you don't really want people knowing where you are. But it sounds like that there are a number of these bases, and what are they doing in them?
Well, we don't know. You see, that's the point. So the other reasons would be for storage of other kinds of weapons, for scientific research, perhaps clandestine mining. Imagine if you had your own secret private diamond mine or gold mine. You could potentially, well, I'm sure there are those who do. You could potentially, earn a profit of many billions of dollars. It could also be, for example, the Mormons have a state-of-the-art underground facility in the Wasatch Mountains outside of Salt Lake City. That's for their, the Mormons are big into genealogical research. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Mormon, but my layman's understanding is that if they know your genealogy, they can pray your ancestors into heaven or something like that. And why God needs the Mormons to do that for him, presumably God knows every person who's ever lived. And if God in heaven, I guess you're in. If he doesn't want you there, I guess you won't be there. Why the Mormons need to do this and God cannot do that on his own, hey, it's beyond me. But that's the way it is. And they have this big state-of-the-art computerized genealogical operation underground in the Wasatch Mountains in Utah. Then the Vatican, of course, has its very famous the Vatican archives, multiple levels, and who knows how many rooms and chambers and corridors. Some of it is very ancient, but my best guess is it's been added to over the centuries, and no doubt parts of it these days are very modern and state-of-the-art because the Vatican is a large organization and they do have financial resources and expert personnel, so I would expect nothing less of the Vatican. I would expect whatever the Mormons have done, the Catholics have done, and probably more because they're even wealthier. And so and then the Scientologists have some of their underground facilities. The Scientologists have one in northern New Mexico. I'm not a Scientologist, so I don't know the details about it. I only know it's there. So those are examples of 3 religious organizations with underground facilities. And then I'm presuming, based on my research, that there must be extremely wealthy tycoons who have their own underground facilities, no doubt very private for security reasons. Then you have other government agencies, such as NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, which have underground facilities. They now have a facility at Mount Pony outside of Culpeper, Virginia, which is underground. Formerly, the United States Federal Reserve Bank had an underground, was in that facility, then they moved out, and NARA moved in. I believe NARA has another one in western Pennsylvania, about 600 feet underground, in an old limestone mine north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, about an hour's drive or so. And those are examples of some of the things. Of course, there's the famous Iron Mountain corporate document repository firm. They have a number of underground facilities, including one in the Hudson Valley. I believe it's about an hour's drive outside of New York City. That's a very secure underground installation that's been there for years, but it's a corporate facility. And so many of these run by a variety of organizations and agencies, some military, some government, but not all. Some are corporate, some are religious. And the motivation for making them varies. The mission for them varies. In the case of the underwater facilities, I ran across this in the United States Navy's open documentation, which came out of China Lake Naval Weapons Station in the mid-1960s. In 1966, they published a document called the Rock Site Concept. And the Rock Concept is, this came from the R&D team, research and development team that the Navy set up to work with this technology of making very large, very deep, manned bases out to sea. I mean, it could be 500 miles out to sea, down in the seafloor, or in a seamount. So you could be under 1,000 feet of water, and then 1,000 feet more down in the seafloor. In the middle of it could be the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, wherever. The technology has been there to do that for more than half a century, and make facilities large enough to bring big military submarines into, along with their crews. The documentation I saw provide for bringing in 2, 3, 4 submarines at a time in their crews. So you're talking about huge facilities with massive underwater pressure locks 100 feet wide, and places for the crews to be housed and taken care of, where hundreds of men at a time. So you would be talking about huge bases down in the ocean floor. Another source of documentation for the plans to make large, very deep undersea bases that could accommodate military submarines came from the Stanford Research Institute a few years later, after the U.S. Navy document. And that also spoke of establishing many undersea bases, and they have either a military purpose or a scientific purpose or a corporate industrial purpose, or potentially one facility could have multiple purposes. It could be used by one or more agencies for one or more purposes, especially in the case of a deep undersea base. The only people who are going to get access are those with the capability to acquire very high technology for working at great depth undersea. And that would be the largest marine engineering corporations in the world, and the world's major military agencies, say of China, of Russia, of the United States, France, and so forth. Outside of those, no one's going to be going in. So it would only be the major navies with deep capability, or the major marine construction corporations with deep capability. Outside of them, no one is going to get down there and get. So once you're undersea great depth, you have a tremendous amount of physical security.
Okay, so I have to tell you, we have a little over 10 minutes left, and I have to get this question in because there will be people that will be very upset with me for not putting it in there. Okay, and that's the whole extraterrestrial question. You know, when people hear underground bases, the first thing they ask is, well, isn't that where the reptilians are, or where the grays are, or, some alien connection? In your research, or even in your personal opinion, I would even be open to your personal opinion. What do you think of that connection?
Well, let's start first with documentation. The official position of the United States government and the mainstream scientific community is that they don't outright say aliens don't exist. They say, we haven't had contact with aliens. We haven't observed their signals, or comments to that effect. In reality, there's a great deal of documentation from government and military agencies themselves in the United States that there's a terrific amount of UFO activity, and has been for years and years. My presumption is, though they won't go this far, that at least some of that UFO activity plausibly is from elsewhere. And there's a great deal of anecdotal evidence that supports. With each passing year, more and more people come forward with stories about contact with purported extraterrestrials. I have no doubt that there are other technologically capable species of life in the galaxy, and that some of those technologically capable species have a space-faring capability. There's no question in my mind at all. For one thing, I've seen a lot of UFOs. And And beyond that, there are a number of people who have alleged to, for whatever reason, have been taken underground and or, in some cases, undersea into facilities run either by extraterrestrials, who may or may not be human appearing, but evidently many of them are human in appearance, not exact terrestrial, human, close. And in one case, in some cases, in facilities with both extraterrestrial and a covert American military presence. American military will not admit this, but it does appear that they are involved in these types of activities and have been for some years, perhaps for a great many years. So at this point, although I cannot document it, all of this pertains to special operations or highly compartmentalized operations on a need-to-know basis. I do not have a security clearance. If I did, we would not be talking. And those who do have security clearances, you will never have on your program. So, in a sense, I'm the best that you'll have in that regard, unless you get a really good eyewitness who's been taken into one of these facilities. There are some of them who have been taken in for reasons that they usually do not understand. And based on the sum total of what I have observed, what I have read, and what I've been told, I don't have any question that at least in some facilities there is an ET presence, and that in some facilities there is interaction between ETs and very classified, top secret, compartmentalized human operations being run through the United States military and other organizations, perhaps that are unknown as to name and their institutional affiliation or allegiance. But I don't have any doubt that's going on, because I've now talked to a number of people with those stories. I've read of more. And given the secrecy surrounding so much of what goes on underground, and even more so what goes on undersea, it's clear to me that whatever's happening is not business as usual, not at all, not by a long shot. And I think the extraterrestrial angle is one of the plausible explanations. Not the only one, but one of them.
Okay, what other thing do you think it could be?
Previous high civilization on this planet who still have a presence undersea and underground and perhaps on the moon and on Mars, that the compartmentalized operations of the military-industrial complex and of NASA have run into. And for the same reasons that they've come down hard on the research of Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson about previous advanced human civilization on this planet, they can't admit the truth. By the way, number one, the previous high civilization on this planet, and number two, some relative populations of those civilizations still exist, be it underground in Secrecy, and or on the moon or on Mars. They can't admit that, because if they admit that, then they're admitting that everything you were told in school was a lie. Everything you learned at university was a lie. The Bible is a lie. On and on, you see, it would kick the props out from beneath the cultural understanding of what social and historical reality is on this planet, and it would directly threaten their own power base. And what is their power base? Ultimately, the belief that they are right and they know best. So if they come out with all that information, they instantly reveal that they have been lying to us all, not just for centuries, but for thousands of years. And if they've been lying to us about those things, then that implies that it's all false. It's just a fake control edifice. It's fake beyond your wildest belief. You just can imagine how fraudulent it is. And Rita, my understanding more and more is that that is the case. It's just fake as hell.
Oh, I'm not arguing or disagreeing.
And Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the more people realize that, the harder the control system becomes for those who would pretend to be our so-called leaders, more superior, more knowledgeable, more intelligent, and when in fact they're just big phonies. They're phonies. They're frauds. They're pathological liars. And so that's the reason for all of this huge compartmentalization and tremendous secrecy, the billions of dollars that are invested, billions, even trillions, in these extremely compartmentalized, super secret programs, because to admit the truth would bring this whole facade of false control tumbling down. And that they cannot permit, because then their position of control would vanish and people would begin asking, what right have you to lord it over us when you have just been revealed as phonies?
But why control everybody? I mean, especially if this has been going on for thousands of years.
Rita, to rule the planet. It's all about domination, subjugation, and power.
But why
Just
give us
power.
control in the first place?
I just answered, because the priority for these beings is power, subjugation, domination, ruthless domination, ruthless subjugation, ruthless imperial power. That's their game, and that's why it's blatantly obvious. And if you don't like it, if you get in their way, they take you. We talked about the plague of violence. It's contained by violence. You know, it's their way or the highway, and if you get in their way, they don't have any problem with destroying people in large numbers. They've been doing it for thousands of years.
Well, yeah.
So that's the answer. It's all about controlling the planet on harsh imperial terms of violent subjugation and domination. It's in your face. What's happening right now?
What do they get from it?
They get power and control. They tell that's what to do.
And that's really what they want, is to...
It's their drug. It's their drug. It's their drug. For some people, they're so shallow, so superficial, and so evil that, yes, subjugating other people, dominating other people, killing other people, torturing other people, imprisoning other people, stealing from other people, that's what they desire, and that's what they do. A normal person who's not wicked and evil does not desire to do those things. They do. And they go to great extents to ensure not only that they can continue to do those things, but that you cannot. They have an exclusive license on the power game, the control game, the domination, subjugation game. You are their subject and not the other way around. And they go to great lengths to ensure that it remains that way. And it's been that way for thousands of years.
That's just scary. But Richard,
that's the reality of planet Earth.
Well, and we're just going to put a period there. You know, I think that's a great place to end, because we have like a minute left. And so what we've been talking mostly about, or kind of about, is underground bases and tunnels, what the government is trying to hide, and a little bit about your other book, Water and Underground Bases. If people wanted to get copies of this book, what's the best place to send them?
Well, to go to my blog site, which is eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com. Let me repeat that, eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com. And then do a Google search on my name, Rich Sauder. The last name is spelled S-A-U-D-E-R. That's S-A-U-D-E-R. And order my books right at my blog spot. And the most recent one is Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. Let me tell you, it's a zoo down there, Rita.
I believe it, but we're going to have you come back on. I didn't get that book They did send me these other 2 books that I went through, and I'd like to get a hold of that. So we'll have to converse so I can find out who your publisher is. But the music's coming up, so I gotta go. Okay?
Thank you. It was great.
All right. Thank you so much, and you be good, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. That's Richard Sauder. His book is Underground, Bases and Tunnels, What the Government is Trying to Hide. And next week, we are talking health and healing and weight loss. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Josh LaJohnny about dealing with food addictions. And in the second hour, with Chef Del about whole food, plant-based eating. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know both these guys. They're both hoots. Please do tune in. Till next time, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.